So this session is again a part of the finance and philanthropy track, Rising Together, Donors and Non-Profits Building Resilient Futures. The session will be a fireside chat with representatives from donor organizations and their non-profit partners to unpeel resilience and its ramifications in the domain. Later in the session, we have a report launch by Bridgespan on the theme. I welcome, who has already introduced himself on stage, Mr. Shashank Rastogi, who is a principal at the Bridgespan Group. Shashank leads the rural prosperity vertical in India and is co-leading the Pay What It Takes India initiative with a focus on transforming funder-NGO relationships. Over to you, Shashank. And just quickly, before Shashank starts, somebody named Mohammad Osama left their wallet in Bheem, which is now at the registration desk. So if you're here, please collect it from the desk.
How much money is it?
We didn't check that. We just checked the ID. So over to you, Shashank. Thank you so much.
Thanks. And hello, check. Oh, if he's a donor, like I'll actually add money to his pocket so that he can cover indirect costs. Sorry, all the funders, you're going to be at the center of my jokes. It's 3 years, 5 years of angst that will come out today. Uh, so, starting the session, and let's get a little bit more serious. It's a formal occasion. The filler part is over. So, this is the session structure. We'll start with what it takes is. We'll talk about some of the key findings, some of the things that we have learned over the past 3 years of formally working on it, and for 5 years that we have been working on this with some of our partner organizations, some of our donor partners. Then we will be having conversations, talks from practitioners, people who have really understood the philosophy and the people from whom we have learned to synthesize certain good practices and understand how they have been approaching the funder non-profit relationship. And finally, we'll have a Q&A question, session. There are a set of volunteers from ISDM in this room. May I have a show of hands for the volunteers across the room? So we will not have question and answers immediately after the speaker has delivered the talk. You could write your question, pass it on. My team is sitting here. Aditi, can you wave? And so Aditi led the work that I am presenting. So she's the hard worker. I'm just the entertainer. So basically, Aditi will collate all the questions wherever they can be merged together to ask a question which answers multiple questions. She'll do that kind of exercise. And then we will share those questions to the speakers and get their perspective. We felt it will be more efficient, and funders really like efficiency. So what is Pay What It Takes? It started as a collaboration. This is Murphy's Law. Okay. Am I audible? Am I audible at the end?
Hello, hello.
Thank you. कुछ तो थिएटर की प्रैक्टिस काम आती है. So we started as a collaboration. I can't use it because I'll not be visible for half the population here. So it started, nothing happened. It started as a collaboration between 6 partners, 5 funders and the Bridgespan group. And it is evolving into a sector-wide movement. We have been supported by 7 funder partners. We have engaged with 200 plus stakeholders. Right now, if I talk about the community of practice, and a lot of people in this room may be part of that community of practice. There are 20 plus non-profits, 10 other funders beyond the 7 partner funders, and 15 plus intermediary organizations who are all advocating for this change. So it is really becoming a movement, and we really hope that this session will lead to more of you talking about it with your funders, as a funder, talking internally in the organizations, and talking about these 5 principles. The first principle is establish partnerships. It should be a partnership, it should not be a donor NGO relationship. Both the NGOs and the funder bring unique value to the table, and that value has to be recognized for this to be a partnership. The second is coverage of indirect cost or core cost. We are actually moving away from calling it indirect cost, because those costs, those support function costs, are so essential for nonprofits to deliver the impact that they want. So coverage, a fair share of program cost and the core cost need to be covered by the funders, the program funders. Investing in organizational development, which is again like you're covering for the current work that the nonprofit is doing. But who is building the organizational resilience? Who's building the sustainability of the work that the nonprofit has to continue to do? Building financial resilience. The COVID pandemic showed how external shocks can affect the work that nonprofits are doing, and how just a 6-month period can really affect the impact that nonprofits have been achieving over a period of time, over decades. And finally, embedding a diversity, equity, and inclusion criteria in their grant. This is a movement not just for funders. What we have realized over time is everyone needs to change their practices. While funders have the power, they have the uh, like greater onus of taking the lead. But nonprofits cannot be absolved either. They also need to reflect on their own practices and see how can they present better picture of what their financials are. How can they present a better picture of what their organizational development needs are. So it's not just about funders changing, it's about the sector changing. And the intermediary organizations as well need to continue to play that role of catalyzing this change. There are a variety of resources that we have created for both funders and for NGOs. You can visit our website. This is a plug. There's also an announcement I need to make. Poonam from AT Chandra Foundation has instructed me that I need to announce that one of the things that we are working on is a database of intermediary organizations. Organizations which can provide different expertise and services to nonprofits. Sneha, who's sitting there in the audience from Atma, she's leading that work along with the Better India to create an online database which will be available for nonprofits to see who can they get support from. Another thing that we are working with in collaboration with ARIA CFO Services is a true cost guideline. So these are some of the resources that we are creating so that nonprofits and funders can accelerate their journey on this path. One thing that I wanted to get into is in the 3 years that we have done this research and we have talked to so many people, there are some beliefs that we have come to know. Some of them are based on logic. Some of them are myths. And today what I wanted to do was pick up what I felt were the top 5 myths which are prevalent in the sector and talk about what the evidence from the sector talks about. This year we have engaged deeply with 14 funders, out of which 6 are CSR organizations, 5 are domestic philanthropic organizations, and 3 global philanthropies, to come out with how different funders are actually approaching these 5 principles. How have they, like even before these 5 principles came into existence, how did they practice these things? And how every funder had a unique way of doing these things. So here's a set of evidence that you can take to your funders. If a CSR funder says, I can't do this, you can show there are other CSR organizations who are doing. So there should not be a rational excuse left, is what our objective is. So I'll talk about the beliefs, and I'll start with myth number 5, which is if a nonprofit has lower core cost and indirect cost, it means it's more efficient. How many funders are there in this hall? Apart from the speakers, any funders? Okay. Thank you for being here. You are my target audience, so I'll talk to you. So, so this is a myth. We did our research. What we found was core cost or indirect cost varies by the size of the organization, the structure of the organization, the context of the organization, the operating model of the organization. So there is no single number that you can talk about. In our research, we found organizations which were having a core cost of 5%. We had organizations which had a core cost of 51%. And there is no right number. The average was 19%. The other part of this is that leading organizations do not suffer from this. We had detailed financial analysis of 40 leading nonprofits in India, and 70% of them were getting inadequate core cost coverage from program funders. They were, in a way, and I know this is a bad word, but in a way, they were doing viability gap funding for programs through unrestricted funding, through other sources of funding. So one funder was actually subsidizing another funder's program. How bad it is, no? And then there are leading funders. If you look at this list, the top 6 are actually CSR organizations. They are flexible. They understand what's the need of the program. They understand what's the need of the nonprofit. And then they define what needs to be done. There is no one limit that they set. So I think that's a myth that needs to be broken. Uh, Sorry, I'm just looking for my time check because I told the people that I talk a lot. So they need to tell me. The second myth, the myth number 4, is sorry. Yeah. The myth number 4, the fourth most important myth, or most commonly heard myth, is CSRs need to spend money in a year, so they cannot get into a multi-year partnership. Hence, they should be focusing on programs which should yield results within a year. That's a myth. If you look at some of the leading, and this slide just shows the CSR organizations that we have profiled, all 6 of them have multi-year partnerships. Partnerships which have been running not just 5 years or 6 years, decades, 15 years. That's how they have been able to deliver impact. They understand that they need to work with value-aligned funders. They understand that real change takes time. And if they're, sometimes what happens is if they're experimenting with a new funder, new nonprofit, or if they're experimenting in a new area, they would probably give a pilot grant. It's almost like they get into an engagement before they get into marriage. They try, engage with a nonprofit, understand if the chemistries work out, and then they get into a long-term partnership. So if a CSR organization is telling you that they cannot do long-term partnerships, then I think it's just a CAs in the house. Sorry, it's a CA's interpretation of law. Like CAs are extremely conservative. Naghma is not. uh, and they really always think what is the worst that can happen, what's the worst that the government can do, and then they will advise. So if a CSR is saying that long-term partnerships are not possible, that's a myth. There is evidence that it's possible. It has been going on. Even after the law came into being, even after the amendments have happened, this is possible. Third myth is OD investments do not directly lead to impact. I give money for program, I see what the impact is. If I'm investing in organization development, where is the impact? And hence, small funders should not get into organization development. That's a like big myth. And I have Gayatri from ATCF who will talk about how they have, like, very logically, rationally, with a very investor mind, actually identified OD as the area where they can create the most impact. So there is enough evidence now. 5 years back, if you had asked me what's the evidence that OD can lead to impact, I would have said anecdotal hai, case studies hai, keh nahi sakta. Sorry if people don't understand Hindi. I have anecdotal evidence. There are case studies, but I can't really say with certainty. But today, there are multiple studies in India and globally which prove that organizational development works. Our own assessment of non-profits and comparison of non-profits who were investing in organizational development versus who were not says that organizations who invest in OD grow twice as fast. The CAGR is twice as fast as those who are not investing in OD. Atma has done a research on their portfolio. People who went through Atma's program were able to reach out to 4x the number. So it's not just the budget is growing, the reach to the community is growing faster. So there's efficiency that's coming. So if the funders are after efficiency, they should actually focus on OD. There are multiple ways that the funders can invest in OD, and some of them are listed. Like you can dedicatedly provide grants to organizations, you can provide access to OD expertise, you can hire people like Bridgespan. And uh, And there are initiatives in the sector now, collaborative initiatives, which are focusing on OD. So there are multiple pathways available to funders to support OD. So what's the excuse? And here are the examples of funders who have these OD related practices. So again, if a funder is saying OD bekar hai, fayda kya hai? Here's the evidence. Go show it to them. At least they'll have to admit that it's their preconceived notion and not logic. Sorry funders, हमारी funding मत रोकना. uh, there's another myth, which is 20 minutes. Oh. This is another myth that there's adequate focus on diversity, equity, inclusion. Everyone is talking about DEI. Everyone is talking about how important DEI is. So there is enough work happening on it. That's a myth. As I said, there's a lot of interest. To the funders' credit, there is a lot of interest. In our research, what we saw was 60% of funders that we had interacted with had a DEI focus. They wanted to focus on DEI. But it's a nascent subject for everyone right now. We looked at two surrogates, whether the funders were tracking what the portfolio composition was. How much of your grants were going to the topic or the axis of marginalization? If you're saying gender is your focus in DEI, what percentage of your portfolio has a gender element? And the other surrogate that we looked at was leadership composition. If you're talking about gender and you're supporting a nonprofit, does the leadership of nonprofit have women in them? If you're talking about tribal community and you want to focus on tribal community, does the nonprofit that you're supporting has tribal community representation in the leadership? And this is the number that we see. 60% said they had a focus. 31% of them were tracking gender portfolio composition. So gender is still doing well after 50, 70 years of struggle for feminism. So we are at least at a place where even if we are not at 50%, theek hai, 24 to hai. So, but if you look at how Dalit, Bahujan and Adivasi as a axis of marginalization fares, 17% tracking on portfolio, but only 5% on leadership. At the same time, not everything is bad here. There are funders who have integrated really good practices on DEI, which like BMGF is one, Forbes Marshall is there, IndusInd Bank is there. There are a lot of funders, and Rain Matter is there, sorry. I should point it out. Because there are very few funders who are able to do it, but they are experimenting, they're trying, they're wanting to integrate DEI in their work, and they are working on it very cohesively. So there is learning to be had from these funders. This is not a myth. Unfortunately, I would have loved to say this is a myth, but this is not. Non-profits struggle to build financial resilience. A lot of you are part of non-profits. How many of you will be able to survive if you did not have funding for 6 months? No need to answer. No need to answer, but good that you can. That's a great thing. Yeah. So when we had done our research, what we found was 54% of non-profits would survive for less than 3 years. And COVID has shown this. A lot of non-profits, especially grassroots non-profits, have struggled to make ends meet. They have to let people go. They had to close programs because funding dried up. And only 9% funders in our research have said that they support corpus building or they support research. Reserves and corpus is not the only way, but the most effective way of building resilience. Some of the funders that we have profiled, so for example, Rain Matter or Rohini Nilekani Philanthropy, because they give unrestricted funding, flexible funding, they are able to support financial resilience. But a lot of funders cannot. Some of the funders have legal challenges as well. So please don't go to a CSR organization and say, I need money for reserves because they cannot by law. But there's a lot more that funders can do in terms of building financial resilience. And we'll have in our speakers Saroj from Pradhan who would talk about what's the benefit when NGOs are able to build financial resilience. What benefits does it bring to the community? I'm not talking about the non-profit. I'm not talking about the funder. The benefits it brings to the community. And that's why everyone in this room is there for the community, isn't it? This is the final one. They, like, I know this is just an artificial myth that we created so that we can segue into the next segment. Uh, there is only one way of supporting non-profits and being pay what it takes aligned. Uh, this is a myth. One thing that we have realized is it is a journey. Different funders can be at different positions. They can have different context and different constraints. And what's important is to start walking on this journey. As you will move forward, you will see the benefits of how these kind of changes in funder practices help you deliver the impact that you're really focusing on. And the more that impact is visible, the easier this journey can become for you. So our research this year has shown that when we talk about these five pay what it takes principles, there are multiple pathways. And all of this is available in research, deliberately kept small font so that you people can't read and download the report. So, so there are multiple pathways. One of the pathway that funders should really consider, I love that, our pay what it takes funders have done that with us, is providing unrestricted funding. Make us accountable for our outcomes. Make us accountable for the results. Unrestricted is not about paisa de do, it's not fill it, forget, shut it, forget it. Hero Honda ad, sorry. It's about more accountability. It's more responsibility on the non-profit. And uh, Samir will talk about this next on how can funders take up a trust-based or an unrestricted grant-making approach. And with that, I will exceed my 20 minutes by just 2, and that's a new record. So uh, with that, I'll start with the main attraction of this session. The 4 speakers who will talk about how they have actually integrated these things in their practice. I would first want to invite Samir. Samir is the CEO of Rain Matter Foundation. And a lot of you would know about Rain Matter Foundation. They see themselves as a part of an ecosystem where they are using funding and grant making in a strategic manner to strengthen the ecosystem about climate change. And with that, Samir, please.
Thanks, Shashank. Glad to be here. Um, a lot of the vocabulary was new to me. Reasons for unrestricted funding, etc., etc., are very, very different. although they arrive at the same ends and goals. But we did it purely from the point of view of what was logical. So just to set some context, we are a 3-year-old foundation. We are focused on climate change as a go-to problem and the whole ambit of whatever climate change covers. Since this is a post-lunch session, I think wake-up call is due. So this is where we are in 2023. 6 of the 9 planetary boundaries that scientists usually track have been breached this year, right? Freshwater change, land systems change, climate change, novel entities is basically the 350,000 different materials we emit into the biosphere and so on and so forth. We've clearly been doing a terrible job of it over the years. This is since this framework has been around, and even before that, from the 70s, people have been pointing at climate change as a problem and the need to do something about it urgently, right? And here we are in 2023, and despite all the claims of tackling millions of tons of GHG emissions through thousands of different efforts across the planet, we've actually not made a dent in the problem. These are also very complex problems. I mean, all of those different dimensions are deeply interlinked with each other, right? It's absurd to try to solve them in silos. You're not going to fix climate change unless you look at the novel entities, unless you look at how land is being used, and so on and so forth. So the point is, these are extremely complex. How does this work? What do I point it at? Sorry. Oh, I didn't do that. Yeah, we're in the middle of collapse. So that collapse, yeah. So these are what are called wicked problems. They are extremely complex. They are far bigger than any one organization, any one effort can deal with, right? So we are not going to solve them through the pathways and the methods of the last few decades. So as we started to understand this better, we realized that it would need a lot of creativity from our end. It would need a lot of creativity from our partners. It would need new frames of looking at the problem, and it would definitely need new approaches to funding, because early on we decided that funding specific projects, POCs, was completely out of the window. It was completely no use. And it wouldn't be additive in ways that would lead to change that might make a dent in that very large problem. So it's been 3 years now, and we've experimented a lot. We went out there knowing very little. We still know little. It's not very little now. We've learned from our conversations with our partners, from traveling across the country, and so on and so forth. We're still grappling with how this dent might be achieved, because these are not simple. I mean, like we keep discussing within the foundation, the most likely outcome on all of this is still failure, right? These are not problems that are likely to get solved that easily. But can we set directions? Can we create new frames of thinking? Can we set directions for the next generation to pick up and run with? I think that itself would look like success. So what I'm sharing here is a few learnings, a lot of open questions that came to us. That actually translated to, I mean, I was surprised to see our name across all those slides on how we've been flexible for a variety of needs, because our conversation always came from this place of trying to solve this problem, right? We're just doing what it logically needs to be solving this problem. How it impacts the organizations, how it impacts funding patterns is a pure byproduct of that understanding. So I think to start with, I mean, we realize that there's a huge body of work out there. India is blessed to have, thanks to everybody in the room who's a doer on the ground, India is blessed to have dozens and dozens and dozens of different organizations in whatever micro niche you want to pick up, doing amazing work out there, whether it's the level of a village or the level of the entire country. I think there's enormous experience out there. And with that experience, we have to recognize that there is great intent out there. People actually want to, and all the amazing founders of all the organizations, many of you are sitting here, there's amazing intent out there. There's a desire to move the needles, right? And sometimes when we put it inside these tight little project boxes, right, we actually work against that larger interest, against that larger imagination that people started out with. So can we just play the role of a catalyst? Can we untie people's hands? Can we free up that imagination and that chase for that larger imagination that these founders, these organizations started out with? So that's something we realized early on. There are some great examples. I mean, the list of examples is very great, very long, but Trees comes to mind. They actually were focused on the urban problem, doing Miyawaki forests. Since then, they've moved to understanding regeneration, agroforestry, started working in the rural landscape. And the entire team has undergone learning. And this partly happened because of our conversations, because of the flexible funding, but the core intent was already there. They were a team ready to learn in any case, right? The same thing happened with Janagra. They were already on a journey to reframe the urban governance and urban policy problem in a different context. And as our conversation progressed, it's now the two pillars are health and climate. And this will now show up across all their work, right? So the space for, I think it was called organizational development, right? That's actually transformative, because if Janagra does this, the next 100 projects that they undertake will actually reflect this, right? So it's not just about what they did for a particular project or a particular context in a narrow way. So I think as funders, we have to acknowledge this intent that exists out there and just see how we can enable it, how we can catalyze it further. It doesn't mean that we go in blind, right? Like you said, everybody who's had the pleasure of my whiteboard sessions knows it goes on for hours. We ask stupid, tough, naive questions. We like to debate because we're not trying to ask you questions about the current milestones or the current set of project metrics. I mean, that's important, and each organization will figure it out because it's in your own interest. But what we really care about is what needles are we trying to move, right? What are the pathways to this large change? What is the impossible that you're chasing, right? And in that definition of that impossible, there are blind spots that emerge. There's a need for collaborations, partnerships. There's a need for new capacities to be built, new ways to think of the problem that emerge. And we really try to set our goals and targets at that level. For the first year, we actually didn't do any target setting because we didn't know how to set those, right? But over time, we have gotten better at it, and we sit down with our partners and actually arrive at those. So it's not that we go in blind. We are trying to solve a problem. We'll try to help solve it better and also free up the tactical in the process. So that's the key part of it. This is a borrowed slide from somewhere in the internet. You can see the reference there. But essentially, I think strategic alignment and tactical flexibility is at the heart of it, right? Because I mean, I'm from the Bangalore startup world, and every startup founder understands the idea of pivoting, right? Why would you continue with a method that you see is not working for you? And as a founder, why would you want the founder to continue with something, right? If there are components to it that are starting to work, why would you not want to double down on it? How can you predict? And we've got proposals that lay out a 5-year timeline down to the last level of detail on how many people are going to be working at what component in the 4th year. How can you predict that? Right? It's a theater of the absurd. So I think recognizing that these are emergent pathways, that these are complex problems that we will learn along the way. We might need a collaboration, we might need to build a certain capacity, we might need to bring in partners, we might need to throw away some work, we might need to adopt new methods. I think these are realities of any uh, anything that actually starts to work in the real world. And if you're really interested in solving the problems, we would be better off acknowledging these realities, right? So I don't think this flexibility is a good to have feature or a, I don't think we should pat ourselves on the back for this. If you're truly interested in solving these problems, I think there is no other way to do this. Finally, pardon the map and its resolution. There is a large question we have started asking around: what is M&E in this space? Right? Can a funder have their own notion and idea of what measures to go in with? Is it even fair? Forget funders. Can organizations define their own M&E? Or does the M&E belong to the problem and the people that the problem exists for? Right? Does the M&E apply to the panchayat or to what you are doing with household delivery of water? Right? Because unless we are moving the needle on the lived experiences of people, the lived experiences, at my home, I do not care about one variable in isolation. I will not allow a plumber in who stands on my best furniture and completely takes it out. You can't walk in and say, I did a great job of plumbing, but I'm sorry about your furniture. Right? But we allow that in our public problem solving all the time. Yeah. So M&E has to move to the community's point of view. And we are trying to start this dialogue. It's still an unresolved problem, and I would love to have a conversation with whoever's ready on this. Sorry. Doesn't seem to. Okay. Yeah. So I was asked to talk about trust to start with. It's all of this. It's not easy money. I think the untying of the hands, the tactical flexibility, the going in and asking tough questions about the strategy, the extension of the imagination, the expansion of the scope, the chase of the audacious. Then the trust is also two-way, as we've learned. I mean, what is our motivation? Is our motivation to solve the problem, or is our motivation a self-congratulatory pat on the back? And people can see through that very clearly, right? So I think we have to also earn trust. It's not just demand that we can place on people. And of course, that comes if we have shared chases. If you're trying to solve the problem along with you, do we take responsibility for the outcomes? Do we solve part of the puzzle with you? Yeah, so we've tried to do some of this. I wouldn't say we are completely successful in every sense of the word, especially on the M&E, we are still struggling. This is how I end all my public speaking, because I think on the climate front, we're leaving a very terrible planet for the kids. And this is what keeps us alive to the real problems, and do whatever it takes to actually try and solve them. Thank you.
Thanks, Samir. And it's really inspiring to see that Rain Matter actually did not arrive at it from hame pay what it takes karna hai. They arrived at it, we need to solve for climate. And that's what all the funders are doing. So thanks a lot for sharing that. And as a consultant, I really want to thank you for sharing a new framework, the Cuba framework: question, believe, align, assist. Thank you. So next, I would like to invite Gayatri from ATE Chandra Foundation. Gayatri leads the ATE Chandra Foundation work, and one of the things that ATE Chandra Foundation has been doing for more than a decade now is focusing on organizational development. So Gayatri. And one more reminder, please ask questions and share. Otherwise, I'll have to think about them.
Thank you. When I saw Sameer's first slide, I said I should have had slides. But when he realized it couldn't move forward, I'm actually thankful. I'm going to stick to paper and pen and talk to you a little bit about what A.T. Chandra Foundation does in organization development. But before I do that, thank you to ISDM for organizing this and Bridgespan for having us here. I'm going to start with a story of one of our NGOs, the Olympic Gold Quest. I don't know how many of you know about OGQ, but it was started by actually stalwarts in our sporting industry. So it started by Keith Sethi, Prakash Padukone, the people who are my generation will know. And it's run by Viren Raskina, who used to be the hockey captain of India. Now, OGQ, their mission is to have India win gold medals at the Olympics, at other sporting events. And while it's the way they do it is by really supporting the coaching, the nutrition, the psychological support, whatever it is an athlete needs to arrive at that medal. When you think about it, it is what actually lifts a nation's pride, its international image. Um, Let me give you an example. It's like what Chandrayaan did for all of us, right? But try and raise money for that. People don't get it. So most of Viren's time went in trying to raise funds. In 2011, they were supporting about 65 athletes. Don't quote me on this number, but in that range. And he had to raise 8 crores to support this. It was a thankless job because you're constantly hearing no. It's exhausting and it leaves little or no time and also, frankly, mental bandwidth to spend on actual program work, which he was hired to do as CEO. I'll stop there. We'll come back to the story in a bit. I promise you it has a happy ending. But let me break down what we mean by organizational development, which will help understand how the story, what it results in. So at the A.T. Chandra Foundation, as I mentioned, we actually support only organizational development needs of our cohort of NGOs. And our belief is that this will actually help the organization make larger programmatic impact. Shashank, of course, had actual data, but this is really our hypothesis as well. When you look, let's take what this means for any organization. Okay, so if each of you in your minds can think of an NGO that you think is the best. It could be where you work, hopefully, but could be any other. Now, what does it take for you to think of this organization as the best? Hopefully the impact that they make. Yeah. Who makes that impact? The people in the organization, the leaders, right? So this organization therefore is able to attract, retain, motivate, retain, I said, and really keep these people focused on impact, right? So they have to have really good HR practices. They have to be able to know, those individuals need to know what do they have to do to make this impact, right? So they perhaps have good strategic clarity. They have good leaders who are, constantly keeping the people motivated. And then they have to be able to measure that impact, right? So they have to have M&E systems, maybe even technology that tells them live कि यहाँ पे course correct करना है, or this is working, this is not. And for you to be able to think of them, they must have communicated this impact at some point. So maybe you read about them on social media. Maybe you worked it. And maybe you've read about them in the newspaper. But whatever it is, their internal or external communication has been strong. And then who's paying for all this, right? Your HR, your leaders, your strategic clarity, your M&E, your communications. You have to have strong fundraising. Now, if you don't have strong fundraising to pay for all of this, you can't do it. Now imagine, and this is true of, unfortunately, for a lot of funders, imagine a funder says, my money you can only spend on programs, sorry, right? You work in education, you can only spend on stationery, on books, and some scholarship money. You work in health, sir? You can only spend my money on medical expenses. Okay, I'll be extra generous. I'll give you 5% because the law allows me to give you 5%, which is a myth, right? Now imagine if you're a 5 crore NGO, your budget size, 25 lakhs you can spend on strategic clarity, your leaders, your HR, your M&E, your communication, your fundraising. And I'm not even getting into your office expenses, your telephone, your travel to come to conferences like this. None of that is covered. So, how is an organization supposed to survive without this? And we are actually going to the extent of saying it's not just about survival, it's about your deeper impact, your growth. And that is what you need OD for. So, when we looked at this situation in the sector, as a foundation, we said this needs to change. We will invest in an organization's development, not just because we believe that that's what's required to make deeper impact, but also because we want data coming out of this in the hope that we can convince other funders that what they're doing is not fair. You're not there on the ground making the impact. Don't tell somebody else how to spend that money. Help them grow it. And be that funder who understands that investing in non-programmatic areas can actually create larger programmatic outcomes. What was it, Shashank? 4 times the beneficiaries as per the Atma report. And a lot of people say, like Shashank mentioned also, that large funders can fund this, small funders can't. I'm also going to the extent of saying, people might tell you, ki you're still a small NGO, you focus on non-program later. Right now, just focus on your program outcomes. Not true. We believe you need to do both together in order to make larger programmatic outcomes really strengthen your organization. I'll come back to OGQ now. OGQ reached out to our foundation and we supported a fundraiser for them. So they hired Neha, who in fact also represented India in the Olympics in Beijing in table tennis. And today, Neha is raising funds for OGQ and also their non-program costs, so everything. OGQ today, from 65 athletes, is now supporting 370 athletes. 73 out of these are para-athletes. They have created a new coaching program because they were able to identify that there aren't enough coaches in India who are of the caliber we need. They have a talent acquisition team that goes to the smallest of places in the country, identifies children who have high talent, and nurtures them so that they can tomorrow become the athletes competing for this country and can actually break out of poverty. So you can think about, I mean, this is, Shashank gave you data, I'm giving you a story, but this really paints the picture of what it can do for an organization. I think we have Preeti here from Quest. And correct me if I'm wrong on these numbers, but back in 2011, Quest was working with 1,200 children. With the help of strengthening the organization, helping them get strategic clarity, focus on building and bringing on leaders like Preeti, today Quest is working across the Anganwadi system in Maharashtra. They have multiple other programs as well. So like this, we've supported many organizations. Like I said, we want to take this data back to funders because we truly believe that unless you build organizations with whom we are entrusting the development of our country and of our world, we cannot shortchange them. We have to support them. And I think for the few funders in this room, we're happy to chat offline and tell you how we've been able to do this. Thank you.
Thank you, Gayatri. Thanks for sharing the inspiring story of what's possible when investment in organizational development is prioritized. And also, thank you for logically breaking it down and saying how it really supports impact. Before I call the next speaker, I just wanted to show a video about the work that they are doing. Can we play the video? And I would introduce Naghma first. Sorry, don't play the video. Let me introduce Naghma first. So Naghma is a CA. That's the negative. She doesn't think like a CA. That's a positive. So, so Naghma leads the Edelgive Foundation, and Edelgive, like A.T. Chandra Foundation, have decades of experience of supporting nonprofits in a true partnership manner. And one of the things that they pioneered in 2020-21 was the Grow Fund, which is a collaborative effort where they are bringing together multitudes of funders to support grassroots organizations on coverage of core costs and organizational development. With that, if we can play the video, and Naghma, over to you.
Hello everyone. There is a reason why this AV was played, and I will come to it in a good time, but there's a very strong reason why this AV was played. I am Naghma. Shashank has introduced me. I'm the CEO of Edelgive Foundation, and I have been given the enviable task of summing up a journey of more than 2.5 years in the next 8 minutes. So, friends, Indians, and countrymen, lend me your ears for 10 minutes and allow for some leakage of time. He also said I was a CA. So in the last decade, I've had many moments of really happening. And the first one was that people said that organization can work with more than 5% of admin cost. And I said, really? How? Then they said, people cost should be low in a humanitarian sector. Really? Like how? Okay. Then around 2017-18, we were just doing a dipstick analysis of the sector, and we understood that 99% of the functioning NGOs in this country are able to access 1% of the grant money in the country, and 1% of the NGOs in the country are able to access 99% of the funding that is available. And that blew my mind, and I said, really? And how are we even okay with that? So democratizing of funding, access to funding became something that has been the North Star for me personally and for Edelgive also. And so today, and for the last 3 years, I've been getting this question again and again. Why grow? And I have no one answer. So by the end of the next 7 minutes, we will come to why grow. Grow happened, I think, on an emergency booster during COVID, because it became very apparent that crores and crores of money was going, but it was all going into atta, dal, chawal, but not into auto, not into chai for the field worker, not for salaries for people on street. And we saw depleting corpuses. We saw teams working on half salary, then no salary. We saw a lot of that. And it became a bit of a problem to watch it. So what does Grow really do? Grow is basically a financial instrument which was designed to give grants to 100 NGOs and in one shot. It was designed to give 100 NGOs, but it was planned for 1,000. Because tomorrow, if we have to scale, we should be able to scale easily. So the ability to fund 1,000 NGOs together, that's what Grow is. Grow is also an instrument where many funders can come together and pool in money and fund a big idea together. That's the second thing that Grow does. The third thing that Grow does is it has access to pan-India organizations. Why? Because we designed it that way. So the first Grow said that we will be a pan-India 100, which means every segment of this country, north, south, east, west, will have representation of 25 NGOs each. No sector will represent more than 10% in the 100. So we have 16 sectors in Grow. 9 big ones, which 10 each, and a 10 number, which are examples of some rare but very important work that is happening. All of this was because we inbuilt it in the design. We went out because we wanted to go beyond the Bombay, Delhi, Bangalore, maybe Hyderabad belt. The outreach went out in 20 regional languages. There were 15 Zoom calls with translations. There were instruction manuals going out in print as well as online on how to fill a form which was designed for capacity building. By the way, GROW also was 100 NGOs getting non-programmatic funding because that's what we thought people really need. We got 2,500 applications. 2,500 applications when we read through it. So that was the first point of delay for Edelgive because our team had to kind of acclimatize to what we were reading. Our form was not asking about programmatic details. It was asking about what people do and what were their struggles in COVID. And the things that we heard were horrific and heart-wrenching. So our process of shortlisting got delayed because the team had to be taken care of also. That's the kind of stuff we started hearing. The shortlist happened, we got everyone on board. 100 fantastic NGOs, out of which nobody who looked at the 100 could identify more than 20. So that was a first win. The whole idea is there are hundreds and thousands of great workers, great NGOs in this country. Can we find a mechanism that brings out this work? So when somebody has money, he or she cannot have an excuse to say, I don't know where to find them. These are 100 compliant, great organizations that are working on diverse issues where if you want to fund, here it is, you can fund. That's what GROW did. On the other hand, GROW has 33 funders. Now, why did 33 funders come here? Because we at Edelgive said something and we proposed something that we've been believing for years. We are not funders of NGOs. We should not be funders of NGOs. We should not be capital providers to projects. That's like looking at a little ant hole to solve the problem of the full mountain. We are shareholders of a large problem. We're shareholders of a cluster. And my favorite analogy is, if I bought a share from ICICI Bank, am I going to go every morning to check if the branch manager showed up? Or whether his KRAs have been met? I won't. I will look at the annual accounts, the share price, decide whether to keep the share or not. Why can't we be smart about money in philanthropy the same way that we are smart about it in our investments or in our personal decisions? Philanthropy needs to be smart. Philanthropy needs to be intuitive. Philanthropy needs to be humanitarian, all at the same time. And we're human beings. We are smart. We can do all these three things at the same time. So why do we have to sit and think about monitoring and evaluation and matrix and admin cost when we have all the evidence right in front of us? And the overwhelming response from even the funding community was that they showed up. So a very important message that I'd like to place, because I know most of us here in the room are organizations who are working on grassroots. Funders do show up. I think there's a huge language mismatch that is going on. And also the matchmaking problem. Where do we find each other? So GROW became that place where people found each other. Why am I saying it this way? This is just the first step. We've not solved a big problem. We're just executing a first step. We have 1.5 years of seeing how it operates. We have the reports that start coming from the organizations. The first report broke our hearts. There was an NGO that wrote to us saying, we have repaired our toilets after 5 years. There was somebody who said we went for a retreat after 10 years. Okay? It's heartbreaking. Nobody should go through that, especially not those who have dedicated their lives to solving other people's problems. So I think what I want to send as a message here is, we all have to show up with what we can, because here there is an ambition of a collective approach. For a collective approach, everybody has to step up. Monitoring needs to become simpler from the funders, yes, but more transparency and more, or maybe shedding of fear from the organizations is also very, very important. When we come together, there is less fear. The GROW's 100 has been able to raise money on its own, not because of Edelgive in the room, because they could show that they can manage non-programmatic funding. They shouldn't have to show it. Unfortunately, the world operates this way, and they have to do it. So today we are sitting on nearly the 2 years over, a huge amount of data into how people spend that should actually be a source of great comfort for the funding community, that people know how to spend money. You and I know. Unfortunately, we need evidence, and evidence has been built. And that's how we see the whole journey growing. Why am I saying all this? I've had more than 10 years of facing more than 100 funders directly. I report to them, and funding nearly 300 organizations overall. And there is a deep understanding of the responsibility, the burden, the accountability that money brings, but also the very many mechanisms that can be used to simplify that accountability and make sure we rise above it. Grow is just the first step. The ambition is there should be many more. The ambition is it should be everybody's, everybody who would like to replicate, because I think we need hundreds, thousands, and lakhs of NGOs from this country to be able to access financial support so that they can do a better job of the responsibility that has been placed on their shoulders. Why that AV was played? When this AV was the AV of the launch of the 100 names. If you see, there are the 100 names of the NGOs there. And when we showed it to our team, like Edelgift team, we had a huge lashback from the team. They said that the music is too aggressive. It's very alpha, it's very macho man. We should have the piano, or we should have the sitar, or we should have the guitar, because, we need to be humble. I say no. Claim the space. We are doing great work, and we can announce that we're doing great work, because there's a place to be humble, and there's a place to claim our space and say, we deserve this, and it's been hard work, and take notice. And I hope Grow becomes that anchor that shows that everybody needs to do it and can do it. With that, I will end my conversation, but I would like to also pull up a very dear organization that's part of Grow, that shared its experiences with us and brought it here. I was hoping there are more funders in the room, but nevertheless, this is for you. Thank you very much.
Could you please write your question and yeah.
Gave us the opportunity and the freedom to grow in our imagination, to grow in our horizons, that we could say, okay, you know what, we could also explore that. Now, whether actually we would or not is a different thing, but to be able to have that freedom, to be able to say, well, we can think of that and that. That's what growth, because I think India's growth is not restricted only in a particular area. I mean, when you look at 100 areas in India, every area needs support. So and also I think all these years, the philanthropists have only been given to programmatic funding. There has been no capacity building funding ever in the philanthropy section in India. So everything was, you do only this with us, you only do that for us. It didn't give you the freedom to think, but I could do A, B, C, D, E instead of doing the Z you are asking me to do. To me, that was the biggest and the best part of this program.
No, I'm sorry. So I've seen this video. When Naghma showed it to me, I had the same reaction. It's a shame, isn't it? At 40-second mark, when Anita ji talks about, no one has talked about capacity in Indian philanthropy. It's like, I think if there were funders in the room, this is the point where I would have said, "Kya kar rahe ho, boss?" Nahi, matlab, sorry, but like, and honestly, I can, like, to the NGOs in the room, I can not do anything but apologize that you have to go through this year on year, day by day, for the passion, for the motivation, for the commitment that you show. So all we can do as sector stakeholders is apologize for that. And thank you, Nagma, for sharing. I can't make any voice crack anymore. But thank you for sharing Rose's journey, and thank you for sharing this video. Uh, we talked about financial resilience being important and not being supported by by the funders, the philanthropists in the ecosystem. And today we felt it was an opportune moment to bring a non-profit which has been able to do, and a non-profit which has built reserves, a non-profit which is showing the rewards of taking that approach, of building reserves, building resilience, building a stronger organization. Uh, with that, I would like to invite Saroj. Saroj is the executive director of Pradhan. We all know Pradhan, and Saroj has been in the sector for so long that half the population in this conference wouldn't have been born by that time. So, so thanks. Over to you, Saroj.
I can speak from here. Actually. Yeah. Thank you, Shashank. That's a very good introduction of mine. I think my fellow panelists have already shared many things, and I have very little to share actually. But let me share the first assumptions actually. Like, what are the assumptions CSOs have actually? Like, we are working with more than 100 CSOs right now. I'm in partnership with 100 CSOs. What they are saying, like, we need funding. Obviously, we need funding. Some of them are saying we need project-based funding. And also, some of them are saying we need funding for capacity building and office overheads, administrative cost. And some of them are saying like we need funding for what we intend to do. Some of them are saying like we need funding for the unrestricted fund, like that type of grant actually. And also we need funding for program delivery. So all these are assumptions actually, and these are matter of stance actually. Like one may decide what to do actually. And I think building the financial resilience, let me share what are the levers that uh, I have learned personally during the last 27 years. And Pradhan is a 40 years old organization, and we've been attracting the best and bright professionals to work in the sector actually. Two of my former executive directors are there in the room actually, but I'm not seeing them right now, but they were there in the previous panels. I think the one of the learning is like one need to have a big idea actually and mission driven approach. So in Pradhan we have that mission driven approach is there, and from the funding perspective, I think one need to have the credibility, that ability to deliver, and that organizational perspective actually, and then confidence and trust of the funders, it's very much important. And also the organizations must have the very good human resource base actually, that investment on the people is the key actually. So building people is one of our core approach actually. And also about the transparency in the systems and processes, the governance and management systems, uh, and how we can be broad basing the leadership pool, bottom up planning, keeping the community at the core actually. I think these are some of the broad levers that we have been following since the last 40 years. And also agility in the approach actually. So I think that is again a very critical part in the broad contours of our approach actually. And also we believe like we are one of the stakeholder, and there are many stakeholders in the entire ecosystem. So this multi-stakeholder partnership is very much important. So multi-stakeholder partnership means it includes the community-based organizations, it includes the CSOs, it includes the resource organizations, donors, government, and many more actors actually. So building the financial resilience, this is the topic of my discussion actually, today's discussion. So what we did differently actually, that part I would like to share. So generally we prepare a 5 to 7 years of perspective plan actually. So looking at the present context and what is the present trend, what are the future trend, and then what would be the financial models, and like what would be the broad engagement strategies. So these are the broad contours of the perspective plan, and here we take the funders' perspective into considerations, and also the community's perspective into considerations, because ultimately the transformation in the lives of the people is the more relevant actually, and that is the key actually. Then second is when we talk about the funding, it's not about the raising fund actually. It's much beyond raising fund. It's about the institutional capacity building of the organization and the capability to deliver actually, and the broad basing the leadership. And at the same time, there are two types of cost actually. One is the institutional cost and second is the program cost. So as a matter of stance, actually we do not take program funds from the funders generally. We generally leverage like 1 is to 4 is to 13. So that is the stance that we have. I mean, if the funder is giving 1 rupees, then we leverage 4 rupees from the government, and in turns it generates income of 13 rupees from the community actually. So that is the model that we generally follow. Then setting goals and priorities, like what would be the priorities for the next suppose 5 to 7 years, that we generally decide. And the alignment between the community's priorities, the donors' priorities, government priorities, national priorities, and obviously our strength areas. So anyway, if there is a alignment between all these things, then that would be a win-win situation actually. And also we think like we are a go-to organization and how we can be a preferred organizations among the donor world. So that is again a stance related issue actually. And how this has helped for Pradhan. Basically during the last perspective plan exercise, we thought that we would be a zero poverty organization actually. Like we are working around poverty alleviation. So we thought that like during this 2015 to 22 perspective plan, we thought we would be a zero poverty organization. And actually this year we are a zero poverty organization actually. I mean, the budgets that we require is already mobilized from the funding agencies. And how this has helped actually in Pradhan, like we invest a lot around this organizational development, the capacity, building the capacities of the executives, bringing people in the sector actually, right? This year we have recruited near about 250 persons actually. So that again a huge number actually. And 177 are continuing as of now. I mean newcomers from the campuses. So building people for the sector is, that is again a core idea of Pradhan, and we have been focusing on that. And then that thematic expansion around the various areas like climate action, gender, then water and local governance. So all those things have been set up. And we have been integrating the systems thinking lens in our, all the approach actually. Like the ideas which works at scale, I mean, those are the stance that we are having right now. Now, then regarding the financial model, so we generally built a consortium of CSOs around a very big ideas, looking at the priorities of the people and then looking at the area context and then what are the opportunities available in those areas and building the multiple stakeholders in the same platform. So that is the approach that we are having at present. And this has been going on well actually. But there have been struggles around funding in general actually, around the CSOs. So I think my appeal to the funders is support the CSOs and build their capacities. Many a times we see like there are 2-3 persons in the leadership role actually. So how we can help the CSOs to build long-term leadership, and then stability in the organization, and then set clear-cut goals, priorities, and help them to, I mean, build around the partnership approach actually. I think that should be the stance from the funding side actually. And obviously, if we want to see the CSOs and the CSO consortiums as centers of excellence, then we need to invest around their organizational capacity actually. And that is the appeal to my colleagues and all the panelists plus all the funders sitting here actually. Thank you. And I will be answering questions if you have any questions. Yeah.
Thanks, Saroj. And at this point, Saroj, if you could take the seat, and if I could invite all the panelists to join us on stage as well. We have quite a few questions. Please pardon me if I'm not able to take a specific question that you had shared. I've tried to look at questions from the subject that we are discussing and like what can be of a larger interest. Okay. Yeah, and I just realized that I forgot to thank Saroj. So, no, I think it's interesting. Some of the things that he talked about, like as a non-profit, sharing the long-term vision and treating the funders as a partner is a first step towards financial sustainability is something that I really like. And Saroj, just to, I need my questions book. To continue with that line of thinking, one of the questions that came up from the audience is, what are the factors that can let a funder feel comfortable that, yeah, this is an organization that I can provide reserves to?
Shall I respond? Yeah. So I think this is a very important question. I think from the funder's perspective and organizational perspective actually. So one part is like they generally see like what are the ability to deliver, what are the organizational capacities, and where they invest actually, and whether the organizational right kind of people or not, whether they have the long-term vision and mission or not, whether they are oriented around the community's perspective, community's need, and what are the systems and yeah, many questions are coming. What are the systems and processes they are having? And like in Pradhan, we have more than 100 executives who are having more than 15 years of experience. And they can, they're leading the changes in the area. They're helping the community to transform their lives and livelihoods. So I think this type of things and the investment on the people actually, that is the core actually. So how we can bring people in the forefront, whether it is community, whether it is development professional, or whether it is for CSOs. And not only thinking about Pradhan, but I think thinking about the overall consortium of CSOs and CSOs fraternity, I think that is extremely critical. Yeah. So I think generally this type of, and in general, like what are the MEL systems, data, evidence, and conceptually whether you can design the program or not. Like for example, we've been working around the increasing the efficiency and effectiveness of MGNRG actually. You see during COVID time, the budget of MGNRG was around 1 lakh crores rupees in India. And there was hardly 1% of the amount which is being spent on capacity building, which you said rightly actually. So if we can do the capacity building of panchayats, SSGs, CVOs, CSOs, then probably the efficiency and effectiveness of delivering this 1 lakh rupees would be much beyond the visualized state actually. So I think these are the, some of the points going.
Quite a long list, I would say. So what I'm hearing is building financial resilience is not easy. It's not something that you can probably focus on from the beginning. It probably requires a lot more effort on organizational development, having that long-term vision, investing in people, investing in processes, so that the funder can have that comfort in providing the results. But to the funders on this stage, none of you are, sorry to say, but none of you are a typical funder in the ecosystem. But no, as in, sorry for the ecosystem, not for you. Like, it's the ecosystem's loss that we don't have funders like this. Uh, so, but like, uh, so what would you look for in terms, and for me, like when you give unrestricted funding as well, what do you look for in a non-profit in this?
Very simply, I mean, what is it that the organization is chasing? How seriously are they chasing it? If there's an alignment there, everything else can be figured out.
From our capacity building vertical, we are sector agnostic. What we want to see is a commitment to grow their impact, either depth or width, and a commitment to share the data that comes out of it so we can share that with other donors as well. So it's almost like a commitment to yourselves, but also commitment to the sector.
Thanks. No, I want to shift to a different question. Yeah, and there was one question, like one part of this question of who are the funders who provide reserves. I just said कि नहीं है. so, so, so very few funders do, and I think it's very difficult for a new non-profit to reach out to a funder and say, we have never worked with you, but you should give us reserves. I think it's important, and it's important for the non-profits to actually convert their existing relationship on these principles, because it's always going to be more difficult to go to a new funder and prove how good you are. So that would be my advice. Naghma, there's this very interesting question that has come, that while we feel really good about all the positives that we are seeing on PWIT, one of the non-profit leaders is saying there is hesitation in supporting admin expenses. There's continuous reduction. They are funder partners who were earlier giving 12 to 15%, now they have gone down to 10%. So how should a non-profit negotiate this?
Yeah, it's very easy for me to give talking points, but I think one of the practical tools is to really relook at your budget line items, because a lot of items that fall into admin traditionally are actually your program costs. And to understand that the budgets need to also be presented in a particular way. I think a lot would get solved if organizations looked at their own budget allocations differently. The second thing is there is a constant under-representation of costs, because everyone wants to look like they are cheaper, more economical, more responsible, and that ends up in actually eating up into budgets here and there. I would say, when I said claim the space, I meant in all ways. If something costs 100 rupees, it costs 100 rupees. Negotiations can happen after that. A lot of times there is so much of an apology about the 100 that the first presentation only comes for 80. And the negotiation begins after that. So there is no need to bloat the budget, but practical, real budgets, very, very clear understanding of line items that must fall in programs, because they should not be part of admin, even if they sound like they're admin, should be put, and that confidence will be built the more you do it. Don't shortchange yourself. Don't write budgets with apologies.
Keeping a tab, like looking at my watch, because I've been given a very strong warning by the organizers. So next question I had for you, Gayatri, it is again from a non-profit leader. They're saying most of the grants that are available for organization development are for organizations below 5 crore or less annual budget. So where should organizations who are mid-size, like 10 crore, 20 crore organizations, how would they, like, is it that they don't need to build capacities anymore, and that's how the funders think?
So, like I said in the beginning, everyone needs to build capacities. What you build might change based on size. It's funny, this question actually, the reason I was smiling was when I remember Naghma was launching Grow. She was asked the opposite question multiple times. This is only for large NGOs. हम छोटे लोग क्या करेंगे? So there are funds out there. Everyone feels it's not for them. I think there is like our NGOs that we support in org development are less than 2 crores to OGQ that I talked about, which is now 50 crores. So I don't think there is a restriction in terms of size, and there should not be.
No, a lot of research needs to go into where is the funder. There are funders for different sizes, and I'm not saying this without knowing the data. There are a lot of desk research and then fundraising. And for everyone who thinks that they are not able to raise funds, even for me, even for anybody who's raising money, you meet 100, you raise money from 2. It's so don't feel disheartened. That's the way the world works. Whether you're in the NGO sector or whether you're in the startup community, you find your funders by, like UK's of 100 frogs, and then that one prince comes. So it's not a development sector problem, it's a capital problem.
I just wanted to take this moment to plug a couple of tools and templates that Pay What It Takes has created. So Naghma talked about looking at your cost in a logical and a prudent manner. So one of the things that I mentioned in passing is a true cost computation guideline that we are developing with leadership of ARIA CFO services and 7 other sector stakeholders. Gayatri talked about having a plan in place for organizational development when you're approaching a funder. We have created an OD planning toolkit and an OD assessment guide, which the nonprofits can use to create a coherent plan when they're going to talk to the funder. They can show something which is developed by 6 leading intermediaries in India: Satwa, Dasra, Dhwani Foundation, Samhita, I'm missing someone, Toolbox, and who's the 6th one? Bridgespan. Sorry. So yeah, so the 6 leading intermediaries have developed that. So there's some credibility to it. It's not one person saying it. 6 organizations came together, really broke each other's head, and aligned on something which is out there and learned from the best in the sector. With that, I actually wanted to come back to Sameer, to you. When you are giving flexible funding, this kind of funding, like I've talked to 40 odd funders, and one of the things that seemingly is there in their mind is, how do I ensure financial control is? So when you look at this kind of funding, what happens to Mera? I'm giving money, so where is the control?
I think relative to the size of the problem, the complexity of the problem, I mean, our entire corpus is peanuts, right? I mean, I think by spending too much of time and focus on how I'm going to control that, I'm doing the goals injustice, right? Like you were saying, 1:4:13. I'm thinking, how do we make that 4,000? Right? How do we unlock larger money? I mean, how do we unlock non-linear pathways to change? Right? Shouldn't I be spending my time there rather than trying to figure out how this jump change is being spent? Right? If somebody can hire a hypnotist and brainwash the whole planet into figuring out more climate-aligned pathways, by all means, go for it.
Oh, now I have a big question. How do I hypnotize the funders and make them think the way you?
No, I think that's what he was pointing out to start with. let's focus on the problem here. If the problem is important, if the place is important, if the community is important, all of this will fall in place. If we have our target, a big target sign painted on the problem and that's visible, I think everything else will align.
So, go on. I have my signal.
At the risk of sounding presumptuous, and I say this with all humility out of observation, the ask needs to be clearer. What happens is, and this is not about funder, and when two people talk, if one person looks unsure, the other will tend to give advice, tend to give whatever they have. Okay, when there's a black hole, everything enters it. The only thing I would really recommend is make your ask so sharp that people listen. When the ask is vague, the funder assumes that the work is not being, there's no focus and there's mission drift and all that. So that's just one very solid recommendation, because we see a lot of the pitches, which is a lot about good work and need to do better, but the ask is very, very vague. So the ask is where I would place a lot of.
And Saroj, do you agree with that?
Yes, I think I 100% agree with her actually. Like the perspective plan which I was sharing, like we prepare a 10 years perspective plan generally. So here, looking at the community's problem and the overall context, like what we want to do, I think that should be very clear. And for doing that, what is the financials required? And obviously, one funding agencies cannot give the entire funding. I think multiple pathways would be there, and then this partnership and collaborations, the need of the hour actually. And I think I 100% agree with her actually what she said. Should be very clear.
So, I know we have exceeded time, and at this moment, I would just like to thank all the speakers, all the panelists, and thank you for sharing and sharing from your heart. So,
I have one thing
yeah,
to say. Sorry. One fundraising idea: you can hire Shashank to do stand-up comedy and raise unrestricted funds for your NGO.
I'm a better meme maker than a stand-up comedian, so you can also use me for proposal development. So, with that,
Thank you so much. Thank you to all the speakers, members of the audience, and our moderator for a very stimulating session. The answers were so crisp, and we really enjoyed it. But I'm really sorry we had to stop, because we are going to also network over tea and then come back for another session. I would like to now invite Kakul Mishra, Director at the Strategic Capacity Building Vertical at ISDM, to felicitate all our panelists as a token of our gratitude and appreciation. Would like to just share a little. I have already shared what our token of gratitude is, but for people who are new in the audience, so this certificate presented to our speakers marks a small planet forward step. A tiny forest is being created at Devandar Dham, Kashipur, Uttarakhand, by a forest institute. A forest is a for-profit social enterprise on a mission to bring back native forests. Kakul, may I please request you to please start with our guests? I'll randomly call out the guests. So we can start with Saroj, since I see him sitting here. Thank you so much, Saroj.
it's in line with the philosophy that we are propounding. NGOs first.
We will, yeah, that was quite planned. And I think for the next DODM, we can have a special session with Shashank on the stand-up comedy and the meme bit. So next we can have Shashank. Yes? We can call Mr. Sameer. Thank you so much. I would now invite Ms. Gayatri Lobo. Thank you, Gayatri. And our last speaker for the day, for the session, sorry, Ms. Naghma Mulla. Thank you, Naghma. May I request all the speakers and the moderator and Kakul to please come in front for a group photo?